Hello, welcome to Mobile World Congress in beautiful Barcelona. I'm Paul Ford with VMware. I'm here with Andy Zmolek, an Android evangelist for Google. And we're here today to talk about the security of the Android platform. 1.4 billion active users. There's this perception out there that Android isn't that secure. You guys have been doing a lot of work to correct that the past 24 months, let's say. Can you talk about some of the efforts you're doing and to change the market perception?
Well, everybody loves, the press articles, billions of devices affected and
Billions.
whatnot. Billions, yes. And I mean, it's flattering in one sense that we've got so many devices out there. But I think what most people miss is that if you actually look at the numbers, and that's one of the beautiful things is we have all this instrumented. We can actually see how many devices out there are affected by any given potentially harmful application.
Security threats.
And what's beautiful is you look at the actual numbers, and you can see that Android is not something to be afraid of. That Android has phenomenal security. In fact, we accept on, for instance, Windows platform quite a bit higher actual rates of infection in real enterprise communities. And we're considerably below anything that we've seen on those platforms, right?
So you're saying less rates of infection on Android relates to iOS, Windows?
So certainly with relation to Windows,
okay.
Right? What we don't know, and I think I don't expect to see this anytime soon, is what the rates are across the entire iOS ecosystem. Right? We don't have a way of instrumenting that, and certainly we're not expecting to see those instrumented in a consistent way. So what we can say is for any given, let's take the master key vulnerability, for instance. What we did is we could see that there were exactly, I believe it was 123 APKs in the wild that showed up able to exploit this vulnerability.
Right.
And at the height of the infection across the entire Android ecosystem, 8 in a million devices were actually infected with one of these APKs, right? If you look at, let's take something more recent, stage fright, none of the APKs that we saw in the wild actually made it onto play. In fact, the ones that we saw, when we say in the wild, what we really mean there is security researchers created them because they didn't actually spread. Right. We didn't actually see any exploitation in the wild. We didn't see a single infected Android device. What we saw was a really big response by the Android ecosystem that, in fact, it prevented that because the response was very swift. Because we're able to say with precision how many, at any given time, how many Android devices are infected with any potentially harmful malware. Those numbers are consistently around 1% of the Android ecosystem. Now, if you were to just restrict yourself to devices that did not allow unknown sources, in other words, Play is the only distribution mechanism for putting apps on that device, that number goes down to 0.05%.
Okay. So with thousands of different devices coming out every year, tens of thousands, honestly, thousands of OEMs, can you describe some of the tools, you kind of hinted on this earlier, some of the tools that you guys are leveraging, whether it's through Play or in the native operating system, to kind of thwart attacks before they begin? And then once you find something, what do you guys want to remediate?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of layers to this answer. The first is Android itself. A lot of people don't realize when I am running an application on Android, each application is running as a different user, right? Not on the Android user level, but in the lower Linux level, right? So this is not at all like the desktop OSs where all these applications are running as the same user. There's a shared memory space, right? None of this those assumptions aren't true anymore. right? So at the very beginning, you've got, if you're going to write something that's an exploit on Android, you've got to deal with that. You've also got to deal with the fact that we do things like address space randomization. So it's more difficult to be able to force a Stack Overflow, for instance. It's not necessarily going to give you consistent results. And then you've got the wide variety of devices that are out there that makes it exceptionally difficult as a malware developer to be able to see the consistent result on every Android device, right? So you've got basic architecture, then you've got these sensor networks that are out there where we're looking at the applications that are visible in the wild, not just the ones that are showing up on Play. And of course, we're able to look at each of those applications as they get submitted through Play. We reject a lot of legitimate applications that might have an old library, that might have introduced a vulnerability, right? So even ordinary everyday developers are seeing the effects of this. In that, I can recall a case where one of my developers said, "Look, I shouldn't be getting rejected because your new policy isn't in place." We went and we looked and we saw, oh, you added yet another version of OpenSSL, and
Right.
that's a vulnerable version, right? And so we're seeing things that the developers themselves sometimes aren't even realizing, preventing those from getting into Play. And then those applications that do get installed, we're able to see where they get installed. If an application gets determined to be potentially harmful, we can even go back and look and see how it's spread, see the geographic spread of that, and in extreme cases, even remove that application if it's spreading in the ecosystem and it's
Right.
causing problems, right? Otherwise, we typically just warn the user and let the user remove the
Move the app.
application.
You mentioned something I want to touch on as well. I think there's another perception out there that Apple does this amazing job of vetting their application ecosystem. And I think we can say that's true. I think some people might say that Google doesn't. You touched on it here. Any details on some of the rigors that you guys go through to validate some of these applications?
I don't think anyone is as thorough as we are, but what we will say is the process that we go through, it's static, it's active, it's looking at the reputation of developers and relationship of developers. So we're able to very quickly determine which apps need additional manual review. And so because we're able to approve most apps very quickly, I think there's the impression that's left that we're not as careful. And I think that's misunderstanding the fact that these apps are going through all these filters. We're taking advantage of machine learning capabilities to know exactly what to be taking a look at. And I think if you were to look at both ecosystems, you would see that there are plenty of applications that didn't get caught until later because they represent new threats, right? I would say that in both cases, the OS vendor involved is being very careful and responsible in making sure that those things don't persist.
Right. Great. Thanks. So we're here at Mobile World Congress, one of the largest, shows in the world related to mobility. What do you guys, anything big coming from you guys in 2017 that we should be aware of?
I think some of the more interesting things may have come out earlier, but are getting bigger, right? So some of the capabilities that we've had traditionally in terms of being able to see on any given device, there's an attestation that's possible with Safety Net, right? And any application developer can call it, any EMM can call it. VMware, I believe, is using these APIs with the AirWatch EMM. And what we're seeing is, as we enhance these capabilities and add even more tools and visibility, that it's giving EMMs and in turn enterprise customers more ability to understand in real time what's happening with their device populations. And I think you're going to continue to see more of that.
Perfect. So in closing, I got to ask a fun question here. What are we going to name Android O? My guess is Oreo. Any insight from the
that
Google
was
team?
a real hard.
Well, I don't know. What are you guys thinking?
Well, okay. I was always pulling for marshmallow, so I was very happy to see. And of course, I have no input whatsoever.
You got a little pull, right? Come on, a little bit.
So, I think many of us inside the Android team do the same process of, all right, what are the sweet foods that are
I think
available?
Oreo's a winner, right?
Oreo's a brand. We've only done one brand so far.
It worked really well,
That was
right?
Kit Kat, yeah.
What about oatmeal cookie?
We may or may not be considering that. It may or may not be being used in some way, but we'll see.
All right, well, now that we're all hungry, we're going to take a break here. Guys, appreciate the time here at Mobile World Congress. I'm Paul Ford from VMware. This is Andy Zmolek with Google, and we'll see you soon. Have a good show.